are non-live. Do you know some people are non-live consumers of Remain Indoors podcast? Gosh, they do miss out, don't they? Here we go. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Remain Indoors podcast. We'll be looking at some lighter news from around the internet, having a grumble when required. Actually, that's the main one. I should put that at the front. And we'll be talking about how we keep ourselves entertained. Remain Indoors. I'm your host, Richard Spanners Ready, and I'm joined by just one guest today, and that is Matt Two Rumpets. How's it going, Matt?
Wait a minute. I've been downgraded to guest?
Oh, I should have said co-host. Okay, here's my thinking. Don't try and host shame me. It's just that when we have interesting guests on, it's brilliant, but a lot of the time the focus goes on the guest. Whereas when it's just you and me, you and I get to talk about Spanners and Matt stuff.
Yeah. Although, are you suggesting that I'm not interesting? Because that's probably true.
No, you're interesting enough to focus in on one in every 4 or 5 shows. I will feed actually off of something you were talking about yesterday, which was quarantine brain. So you were talking about quarantine brain yesterday, Tuesday, where you couldn't set your alarm properly. No, you couldn't set your sat nav properly, and so you were late.
Yeah, that's correct. And I certainly wasn't sitting around at 1:45 this morning and saw your WhatsApp notification pop up and thought, oh, geez, yeah, right, that thing.
See, I messaged
that totally didn't happen.
I messaged you to say, I'm running late. Now, when I say I'm running late, what I mean is I won't be as early as normal. That's my version of late. So I'm still going to be there on time. I just won't be there with, I might have to rush my prep, or I will be there. You may be alarmed to not see me 10 minutes early. Whereas you were literally just on the couch with a coffee.
Yeah, basically. Well, to be fair, my gig is tonight. So I'm already thinking about all the steps necessary to get there on time, the equipment I need to bring. And so I'm already thinking about, well, what I should do right now is get out for my run, because it's going to be hot, oven hot today. And I should get out early on my run, and I'm going to have to eat because the concert's at 7. I won't have dinner. There's all this logistical stuff that has to be dealt with. And I'm sitting there, and I happen to glance at the phone. I'm like, oh, right, Thursday. Yeah, Thursday. Show, Thursday. Yeah.
And by happen to glance at your phone, let's be completely clear, you mean you were already looking at your phone because you were doom scrolling Twitter for all the things that make you angry.
Well, I was, but I do that on the iPad. So no, it was fortunate that I picked up the phone and looked at it. Otherwise, you'd have been sitting there in the shed by yourself being very unhappy.
Oh no, what would I do with a camera and a microphone? Oh, you know me, I'm a wallflower. I'd have nothing to say. I'm like you though, Matt. I think we both do it. I think we have things that we're passionate about, in the news, and things that spark us off, or someone from a political party is currently saying a thing or pushing an agenda, and there comes a gap in my schedule, and I'm like, I'm feeling happy and well-adjusted. I've just done some successful parenting and a live stream. And look, my career is showing signs of actually producing some kind of fruit at the end of this 10-year barren wander through the desert. In order to fix that calm mental state in my head, I should start doom scrolling on Twitter for the things that I know are going to trigger me and make me angry, because part of that anger is burned into my soul, and it is a hungry monster that I need to actually actively feed. And I just catch myself doing it. I'm going, you don't need to search hashtag thing that triggers you the most. You don't have to, but I do.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of... I enjoy arguing. You may have noticed this.
No.
Just on, my wife is not this way. She hates arguing, any hint of conflict, and she just nopes right on out of there. She really does not like arguing. I come from a family where we argued about everything all the time, constantly, not on a passionate, I hate you, I want to beat your face in with a stick kind of arguing, but
debate.
Sort of that academic, legalistic, rhetorical, point scoring kind of arguing. Debate. Yeah, absolutely. My daughter very much likes arguing too. And hilariously, our process for working on math, when I help her with math, resembles nothing so much more than a really unhappy argument. And my wife actually has to leave the room when we work together because our process is so argumentative, but it's very successful. She does well with it, you know, but it is just, my wife is like, I cannot take this. I am out. You guys, you just have to. Yeah.
No, yeah, and I think my kids are going to grow up in that environment as well. Me and Nick give no quarter, and a lot of the time it isn't like born out of anger. It is born out of defending our corner and passionately kind of arguing what we believe in. Like the amount of like arguments that have nothing to do with our relationship, where we do get really bogged down in a debate. How much a primary school teacher should get paid? How good were the Beatles? And, you know, would they stand up today? Things like that. We'll get really bogged down in the... In fact, here's one, Matt. Here's an argument that we have, and it's very similar to an F1 argument that we have. So I say, like, Senna was great for his time, but every driver on the grid now is a better driving standard than Ayrton Senna. And one of my friends, Lee, who sometimes tunes in, gets really, really, really upset with me. I'm like, no, all the modern drivers are technically better. Obviously, they didn't do as well within their era and generation. And so I say to her that very likely the same is true with music and musicians. So we look at Top of the Pops 1980, and you look at the standard of the choreography, the standard of the vocals, the way the music was written. And I'm not talking about everyone's going to point to one classic. Everyone's going to go, oh, but Yellow Submarine would be just as good today. In general, the standard of those top performers that were being marketed just isn't as good as the standard of the guys even today that are considered also-rans or considered a bit cheesy. Vocally, they're better. Instrumentally, they're tighter. The choreography is mental compared to that time. And I say to her, music is just better now. And if I say that, we lose like an evening arguing about it.
That's because you're wrong. The only thing you would be correct about that I would agree with you with is the choreography and the staging, like the performative aspect in that sense. Vocally, nah, it's not true. The people who came up back in the day, and now you're talking to someone who worked with people who are actually, I've worked with people from the 60s who were multiple platinum album sellers on stage, like, you know, in the last 20 years. Four Tops, what's his name? The Drifters.
Okay.
Like, I've done a bunch of the oldie shows with those guys. And what I will tell you is, vocally speaking, and even from a performance point of view, they remain astounding to me. And how good they are, because they performed more and more regularly and with more people than anybody does today. And it's the day after day performance. I mean, when Count Basie came to our high school, they did 300 plus dates a year. Like, that means they performed at night. And the more you perform, the better you get at performing, the better your machine comes. And you just don't have the same amount of performing. So you're not going to, I don't believe vocally that they are any better. And certainly not in terms of musicality than going back to the 60s and the 50s and the 40s, because they did it every day, all day long, constantly. And you just don't have the same level of opportunity today, at least as a musician, as a freelance musician. You don't have the same opportunity to play every day like you did back then. And that makes it harder to be as good. That's my take on it.
You're not my real wife, Matt. You know, I don't need this from you as well. Okay, I will say, though, you have pointed to, like, the very cream of the top. And my argument never stems from they were bad and now the modern musicians are better. But if you look at the cream of the top of that time, there's not just one of those. They're not standalone. There is 100, 1,000, 10,000 artists who have been trained. The training is better, who have been prepared better, who've started younger, and there's just more of them. The overall standard of music and vocals is higher. You can point to the odd exception, you absolutely can, and you can point to the odd person who would fit in perfectly well in this era, but to say there's not a greater wealth of musical talent now than in the 60s, you're statistically wrong. Maths, etc.
there are going to be more people who are musically talented because there are more people. I won't argue with that. Training, I don't know about that. It's true for athletes, but I'm not so sure it's true for musicians. And actually, I would argue the opposite, because their performance demands were so much more stringent. You don't have electronics. Most concerts you go see in an auditorium, the singers half the time aren't actually singing. They're faking it to tracks so they can do all the choreography, because you can't do that kind of choreography and sing that way at the same time. Like, literally you cannot. And this is a true thing, and I know it. So I'm not sure, because you can't survive singing that much unless you do it really, really, really correctly. You can't survive playing that much unless you do it really, really, really correctly. If you're off a little bit, eventually you get injured and you are done for. So training, I don't know, maybe in some aspects is better. It's certainly more technologically driven and efficient. And the people who know what they're doing, yeah, they can tell you what you're doing. But I'm not as convinced by that as I am by the athlete side of it, where I think you can absolutely point to the training and say that, yeah, there's a level of technical skill that people in previous generations lacked because they didn't have the data to train that way.
So with athletics, it's much more measurable. So, of course, with music and stuff, there's so much subjectivity to it. But even though then the chat room, I mean, they're all agreeing with me. I've never seen the chat room so united as they are in there. Hello, chat room. Hi, how's it going? Shush, stop it. Stop. You know he feeds off your energy. You're hurting me. You're hurting my claims.
Yeah, they are full of great examples of that. And the auto-tune thing, yeah, I mean, it's different playing today. It's different in what you do and how you approach it to how it was back then. And in that sense, I wouldn't disagree. But I think you lose something. There's a certain degree of individuality and musicianship that has been subsumed by the recording industry, where the requirement is that everybody sound like everybody else, at least if you're a sideman.
Okay, give me this. Okay, so you and I were going to do a little tour. I'm going to take you around downtown London. I don't know what I mean by downtown London. We're going to go into the centre of London, down to Soho. We're going to go through some bars and a time machine, so we can flip between the 60s and the 70s and today. We're going to do the same in Manhattan. We're going to go down to Greenwich Village. I don't know the history of music in Greenwich Village, but without the technicalities of that. In the 60s, in both towns, we're going to see the very best guys, and they're going to be amazing. If we were to then fill up the rest of the bars that have musical entertainment that have that today, we would see the quality start to really go down. Whereas today, you can go to a Tuesday night somewhere in London, somewhere in Manhattan, and you will have a real high standard of talented people filling up nearly every corner, street corner even, every back bar, every restaurant basement filled with talented, high standard musicians. And you've got to give me that is going to be better than the 60s.
I would agree with you for the following two reasons. One, there are more people, there are more musicians. So you have overall
a better standard. Thank you.
The top 1% is equal to the top 10% numerically. And number two, and this is crucial and people don't appreciate it, the venues for performance are also probably 1/10 now of what they were back in the 60s. So essentially what you're saying is that the top 1/10 of 1% of musicians today will sound better than the bottom of the best 10% of musicians in the 60s. That's really a hard argument for me to make. That's going to be true pretty much, period.
Okay,
world-class musicians are world-class musicians.
I think like for like. You can do the technicality of who had more venues on, which era had more venues on. I just think you would find it easier to fill up 1,000 venues with talented musicians now. So that's why the overall standard is better. That's all. As a field, music's better. But that wasn't the argument, Matt. I'm taking the last word and moving on, and I know that you never stop me when I do that and bring it back to a previous point.
I never point out that it's just a numbers game, and in fact, And in fact, there are so many more musicians and people who've studied music that accounts for entirely for the difference, and that it's not the training or that they're better or worse.
Tell you what, I saw a thing or heard a thing. It was on a popular podcast. I'm sure a lot of people would have heard this, but it was the difference between Usain Bolt and Jesse Owens.
Right.
Sprinter from the Before Time.
Yeah, from the 30s, right? Yeah.
So they accounted for a bunch of factors, including like the different track surfaces that they would run on. The fact that Jesse Owens, I hope I'm getting the right name here, had to dig his own starting thing to put his feet into, dig a hole for your feet, whereas Usain Bolt had a running track and really like advanced things to run on, plus running equipment. And I think they didn't even include training into this. And they closed the perceived gap up to about 2 meters. And that was the actual gain in the generations, when on the surface, it looks like there's a much bigger gap. So that was interesting.
Yeah. And a lot of that is technology. I mean, we have probably, well, I don't know, you could argue about whether or not we have better instruments, but in many cases, we have better instruments that are capable of more things. We have better sound systems. You certainly didn't run around with your own lights to clubs like people do today and stuff like that. So there's a lot. And then that gets down to the subject of how am I judging music at this point? Is it solely the acoustic? Are we talking musicality? Are we talking about technical ability? Are we talking about playing in tune or singing in tune? Or what exactly are we really meaning by this? And then we could probably spend the next 7 or 8 shows arguing about how I meant one thing by it and you meant the other thing by it, and we really weren't even arguing about the same question
I get the feeling like if we look back, obviously we weren't there.
Yeah.
So we're now looking at the Aretha Franklins and the Michael Jacksons and the Four Tops and those, the real kind of like belting voices, the real distinctive ones. But what I lack as somebody who's 29 years old is I lack like the Jason Mrazes of the 60s. Jason Mraz, really great artist, but relatively low on the superstar scale. Is he going to be remembered in 50 years like Aretha Franklin? Probably not. But I've been sitting here today listening to him and Eliza Doolittle, who I think is a brilliant songwriter. I don't know. If she writes her song, she's a brilliant songwriter and a great little singer as well. But then I'm looking at this market, I guess, with more fondness because I have a deeper knowledge of it. We don't know the Eliza Doolittle of 1960, do we?
No, and 50 years from now, you won't necessarily know the Jason Mraz and so on and so forth, as you correctly point out. And that's really who we're talking about. And that I understand what you're saying. I don't know. It's tough because you always stand on the shoulders of the people who come before you. So in terms of musical composition, and just music is so much more available to people growing up. I mean, you talk about people like Clifford Brown, you talk about people of that generation. They learned their craft from going and listening to live musicians and befriending them and then being able to sit in with bands. Now I can sit down and have the entire universe of music on my computer. So my influences are so much huger. If I'm a creative person and a composer, what I'm able to produce from that, theoretically reflecting all those influences, gives me a much greater creative scope than I would have had back then. So again, there's another way to parse it and look at it. And it's not always clear that there's a definitive, easy answer to the question.
Maybe that's why me and Nick spent so long arguing about this kind of thing. But this is where it came from, is that my kids will now pick up on this kind of thing because they'll kind of go, Dad, is this a real argument, or is this like, one of those arguments? I'm like, right, it's okay. Yeah, it's one of those. Don't worry about it.
It's always one of those. Mr. Phil mentions Nick Drake. Do you know Nick Drake?
No.
You should go give a listen. He would fit into a Jason Mraz-ish category. Yeah.
Good. That's a good recommendation. And we are actually going to do a couple of TV recommendations today as well. Obviously talk about the elephant in the room, which is my bald Swede. And we've got some general whinging lined up as well. And there you go. But we're 20 minutes in this carefully curated plan, ruined by your obstinate desire to constantly score a victory against the man.
That's a good thing I'm not argumentative, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, it's just based. We've fallen into each other's laps in that way because if I ever wanted an F1 podcast and have a co-host who, like you, mainly, I liked that you were analytical and that you would get a new story and really like flesh out, go out in different details and get to the core of the matter. That's why we have you in our F1 podcast during the race reviews, which are coming up soon.
I know, very soon, right?
And we say, like, look, where's the race won and lost? We're obviously going to talk about the aspects of the race, but let's have a look overall. Where was the main battlegrounds of this race? So that's what I like. That's what I like having you for. It's just a wonderful coincidence that we both also like to argue the toss and batten down and fight our corners, which I think has been the core of Missed Apex, isn't it? It's the kind of fights you have with your mates.
Yeah, it is, and it provides the endless discussion, and it generates a better truth overall for your listeners.
Do you know the downside?
People don't like to hear bickering, I suppose.
There might be that. Sorry, I've interrupted you there, but the downside of that is there are some people who go, like you and me will argue for 20 minutes on different sides of the fence, making our cases and respectfully disagree and then end it. And then there'll be someone who goes, oh, that Matt Trumpets thinks the X situation was B. What an idiot. I'm never listening again. But I'm like, dude, I literally argued the opposite, which I'm presuming is the camp you're in, for that whole 20 minutes. Your side was well represented. And then we get people the other way. You're an idiot. You're just anti-Alonso or whatever. Trumpets just listed out like 30 reasons why I'm wrong. Why didn't you focus in on that bit, you bleh?
I know. It always amazes me that, not to give away too much behind the scenes, because usually when we argue points, we argue them for a reason. There is a matter of substance there to be defended, but we don't always argue our own personal beliefs as a matter of course. But no, if all you want to hear is your viewpoint confirmed, Missed Apex podcast may not be the podcast for you. I'm just going to say.
No. I mean, yeah, we're not argumentative for the sake of it, but like if I'm more, if I'm right in the middle of a fence, I can see the merits of both sides, and you do something, you'll trigger me basically by going, no, the argument A is definitely sure, and if you think otherwise, you're a moron. I'm like, oh yeah. And suddenly like 1,000 argument B side of things come to my mind, and then I just I allow that to take hold, and then I want to win that with the fire of 1,000 suns, So yeah. I mean, there are times as well where I'll go into the group and I'll go, I'm really pro Hamilton in this racing incident. We don't say that word. Who out of interest, is anybody here? I will specifically ask, is anybody going to argue the other side? So, there is an element of that.
Yeah, basically we're F1 debate club.
F1 debate club. Yeah, why not? I love it. It's how you understand the sport. So whereas other outlets will go, oh yeah, they just crashed. Crashing cars, that happens. So, whoa, you're missing the why they crashed is the fundamentals of the sport.
If iRacing has taught me anything, is that, yeah, it's always someone's fault.
Absolutely. It is always, so it's definitely always more someone's fault. Anyway, so point one on my notes map for today's show. Point one, it was.
Shall we begin?
Yeah,
into it.
We can start now because you were talking about. This is the sentence I started with. Hey Matt, I've got a follow up on your quarantine brain thing. Right, I was remembering reasonably early on in the pandemic, the people in the supermarkets were really stressed. Like that was one of the least pleasant jobs, and I don't think I told that story here. But this lady, she was clearly having a very stressful time. She did not look happy. And I put my stuff on the conveyor belt, just the normal, checkout, and it goes along the conveyor belt. And every time, when you finish, you put a little separator thing on the end, right? So when you're done, you put a next customer please thing on there. And so she started scanning my stuff, and I'm there getting it the other end, putting it in my bags. And halfway through my shop, she stops. She just stops scanning my stuff. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, okay. And she's getting frustrated. She's getting like irritated. The price is up on the thing. It does a running total of the price of how much the shopping is. I'm thinking, does she want ID for something? It's like, no, the alcohol's already gone through. That's the precious. I put that right up front to make sure I don't forget it. So she's looking at me impatiently, And I figure out she's waiting for me to pay because she thinks that my next customer divider has arrived at her till. But it wasn't. It was a Toblerone bar that I had bought for my wife. And it was, it's like the triangle shape. It's very similar. So she'd seen this Toblerone bar come along and just stopped the shopping and thought it was the end. Now, what I realised today, this is the beauty of having things in the show notes. What I realised today is I would never have normally thought about that again. But because I'd put it in the show notes about 2 months ago, I've suddenly realised the reason she was probably so grumpy afterwards was because it was sideways and in the middle. That wasn't deliberate, but she must have thought I was playing a hilarious prank on her. And she's not entirely wrong, because now I've figured that out. Every time I buy a Toblerone, I'm definitely going to put it on the conveyor belt like that and snigger to myself if they stop.
Because you want it to take even longer before you can actually check out the store. Yep. Okay. Good plan.
Yeah, I just there's a little Loki in all of us, isn't there? There's a little mischief in all of us. But oh my God, she was just so upset. And now looking back, obviously we appreciate the stress of that situation more, but it must have been that she thought I was pulling a fast one on her, and that she's thinking, that's the last thing I need. Yeah, but quarantine brain. Quarantine brain. There we go. We're all suffering from it.
Yeah, well, it's hard because being at home and not venturing out much, dates and days, they become this morass of time from which it's hard to extract yourself or stay oriented. I suppose people who have daily things and a calendar who are actually working, maybe it's a little bit different for them. But if 90% of your work is dried up and you're just got the other 10% and it's not super calendar dependent, then you really do suffer when something calendar and time specific shows up again. You're like, whoa, I am out of practice with this.
Simon would like to say supermarket workers have been the unsung heroes of this pandemic, or we would have been screwed without them. Yeah, and obviously a load of trades are like that. And none of them were expecting to have to step up and somehow be vital to the supply chain. You just don't think of checkouts and people stocking shelves as vital, but they were.
And I do love how they support basic economic theory, that how essential they are to our society, they are directly rewarded in proportion to that.
Yeah.
And how the country has stepped up and recognized how important they are and made sure that they're taken care of. Oh, wait.
No, it will be.
I'm wrong about that, aren't I?
No, but it will be entirely forgotten. And, similar things happened in the military. There are some people who will look down on you because you're in the military and will say things like, well, it doesn't matter if you get hurt, it's your fault. You signed up for a dangerous job. But then suddenly when there's a northern town that has flooded and you're the only ones with the equipment and the helicopters and the willingness to put bodies in a river to get things out of there, all of a sudden, you guys are brilliant. It's like, well, actually, we've been willing and able to do this the whole time. It's just that now you've appreciated it. So cleaners and nurses and supermarket workers, they've always been brilliant. It's just that they've had the spotlight focused on them.
Yeah, well, and for those who are paying attention, you've learned an awful lot about what really matters in your society and what really doesn't. And what you do with that knowledge is, well, that's going to be on you now, isn't it?
Are we going social justice warrior here again? Are we drifting into chest beating? I don't like that term. Social justice warrior just means like caring about stuff. That's most of the time, isn't it? Look at him caring about something out loud.
Yeah, well, I mean, for those of us in the U.S., it's really it's a difficult time as you watch your country burn from this virus, for which there is no excuse at all, because we have the science and the knowledge. We had the science and the knowledge, but the action was not commensurate with possession of said things. It's really frustrating. I was talking to my daughter about this. To me, fundamentally, this is a problem of ecology. And in ecology, one thing you learn is that systems are interlinked and interconnected, oftentimes in ways that are hard to measure, that we don't automatically see. And if you are someone who cannot, refuses to think ecologically, then it's very easy to say, well, that's your problem and not my problem. And this exposes, I think, the weaknesses and flaws with that kind of thinking pretty much all the way.
I won't pretend to be an expert on US politics nor the response to the coronavirus, but certainly there have been lots of different approaches. And what I will say is that at the beginning, there was a lot of so-called doomsayers saying, if you don't do X, Y will happen. And in the countries where they did X, Y didn't happen as much, and Y happened more in the countries that seemed to do less of X. All I'm saying, it was entirely predictable. The results that certain states have gotten themselves into was predictable and predicted. So it's not one of these things where you can go, well, you didn't know. Like, we knew, and it felt intuitive, and it is now coming to light where they go, because we didn't do such and such an action, and we warned that Z would happen, Z has now happened, and people are going, whoa, you can't say that. Yeah, no, you absolutely can, because the people who understood these things, loads of people standing up and going, oh, by the way, I'm a pandemic expert. This is literally my career. This is what I've studied. We should do this thing. And it was largely ignored by several nations. And the results track almost exactly between response and results.
Yep. And that, for those of us who are still based in reality, is just, it's a bitter pill. It's a bitter pill.
Let's go to the micro now. You mentioned getting out and about. I haven't been. Can I whisper this? Because I'm a bit embarrassed.
Okay.
I'm a bit embarrassed. All right. So even though I've been talking about being slightly less disgustingly fat, the scales are in my favor at the moment. Having a lot of salads. Having like a nice, like a leftover meats, and then just put it with like just green stuff. Just that, you know, the stuff there's like a secret drawer at the bottom of the fridge. And there's all these kind of, they're sort of squishy foods that are mostly water, but sort of kind of fill you up a little bit. Yeah, just been putting a bunch of that in a bowl with like whatever, with like vinegar or something. I don't know the recipes. And just having these salads. And that has been, it doesn't make you feel full up, but you can pretend while you're eating it that it's real food.
Yeah, I think that definitely will help with the reducing your caloric density. Will certainly help with the weight loss, because you can eat a lot of food, but you've not consumed as many calories, and
it takes longer.
Is everything.
It takes longer though, right? That is not my confession, by the way. That's not the thing I'm embarrassed of, that I've been eating salad. But it takes longer to eat that food, to sit and eat it. And you know, one of the things in human evolution that allowed us to have the time to dedicate to other things was cooking. So by cooking our food, you could consume it a lot quicker. Try and eat 14 raw carrots versus 14 cooked and boiled carrots. You can take those nutritions much on board much quicker. Whereas now we have to do the opposite because we've got too much nutrition. So give yourself stuff that takes a long time to eat. But my Stuart Neal says I've hidden the scales. I've had a few people say that. But the confession is I've not been outside except for going radio duty, where I literally just went to the car, drove to the studio, drove back. I've not been outside since last Wednesday. Thus has been the nature of the workflow we've had, homeschool. The kids have been out and about with the wife a few times. But I suddenly realised Wednesday, when I talked about taking them out to the springs and out to the river, that's the last time I left my property.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's... I get out for a run every day, so
yeah.
At least I have that.
No, and this is it. I've parked. I haven't done a run in that time at all either.
I have been peripatetic this week. I've been out to New Jersey, not only for a rehearsal, but also I have to pick up the wife. I got to go pick up more stuff for her work tomorrow. And of course, I have to go out tonight because I have my concert. And it has been interesting and different to sort of be out in the world with an actual work project and not just, I'm going to go to the grocery store now.
Yeah, I want to talk about your work thing in a moment because it's exciting and funny. So, but yeah, the fact that I have not been out just made me realise that I wasn't bothered. So it's not like I haven't been out and I'm not clawing up the walls to get out and about, because I sort of come to work here, which is the shed, and do like, you know, voiceovers and podcasts and streams and stuff. But, you know, then I go inside and we've got the dining table, which transforms very quickly into our social and eating area. You know, we've got the thing down. Everything goes on these trays. These trays go away underneath the kids' tables. And then when the meal is finished, homeschool kind of deploys again, like Transformers. Like we should make the noise, you know, the Transformers noise.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
That was an amazing representation of it.
That was it. If they need me for the next
Not necessarily accurate, but amazing nonetheless.
So I've got there's that. That feels like 2 rooms, and then obviously you've got the bedroom and all the cool stuff that happens up there, like watching TV on my phone, or and then you've got the sofa in the living room, which has become kind of like our home cinema. So I felt pretty satisfied at home and not felt at all frustrated that I'm not being out and about, not going for the runs. That's been one of the frustrating things. But I was like, is that okay? Do I need to start worrying about myself that I've been fine, more than fine, probably been happier?
No, the worst thing about this is I have come to realize that my true happiness will be achieved where I can just basically work from home.
Yeah.
And only go out if I have a rehearsal or a gig with other musicians. I would really just happily never leave this apartment or, wherever we wind up when and if we leave this place.
But
I just like commuting at all is just the worst possible thing is basically what I've come to learn.
But you do have to leave the apartment today because you've got a super fancy, worthwhile gig. So remind us, what is it you're doing? You're leaving the house and doing a thing around people.
Right. So last year around this time, the brass quartet that I play with, Prometheus Brass, we've been together since the early 90s.
Did you make that name?
25 years.
Who made the name?
Huh?
Did you think of the name?
Mm-hmm. I did. I mean, we had a name
Prometheus.
discussion and I suggested it and it was agreed upon by the others. So I can't take full credit for it. At least that's my memory of it. Of course, my memory of it is 27 years old. So grain of salt. Doesn't matter.
It would make
We
a
don't
good
really
movie. I just think that would Prometheus Brass, like an ancient. I'm imagining like an ancient tool of the gods. This giant hammered bronze statue coming at people. I'm thinking about that film now. Sorry, your band Prometheus Brass.
Right. So we've played together forever, and last year we were hired by the Garden State Philharmonic to perform as a Garden State Philharmonic brass quartet at a World War II celebration around July 4th. And it turns out that this is an annual thing we do. We were actually hired by the town. I think we performed as them, but they have a separate July 4th concert they do. And they've done it for more than 60 years running, and they wanted to have one this year. And because we have eased into phase 2 in the region, they decided that it would be safe to have it at an outdoor venue where people could distance. And because we're a quartet, we can distance ourselves on stage and it's outdoors, which is, I think, now generally accepted to be a fairly safe thing to do. So they hired us and we're giving a concert tonight in Toms River at some place that I have to put into my GPS and get to by 6 o'clock for a 7 o'clock show.
No, you have to commute.
Yeah, and I will tell you the place I'm commuting to will probably be well over an hour's drive each way.
How long are you there for?
Well, I'll get there at 6. The concert's an hour-ish, so I'll probably be at least 2.5 hours there. Plus figure 2.5 hours total drive time.
And set up as well.
Plus consider the 2-hour rehearsal that we did on Tuesday and the drive to that, which was about another hour and a half. And then, the practicing that I've had to do for the music in the meantime is, even though it's music, you still practice it anyway, just to get back in touch with it. Because it's been a while since you played with other people, and also just to get in shape. So yeah, it's not really a great financial move, but it does feel good to actually play music with other human beings again.
Anton says you guys should be called the Brass Holes. I like that. That's funny. Yeah, talking about whether like it's worth it and the value and the time that goes into it. This is what I'm learning now is with the freelance stuff. You get a rate that is just for like the time that you're there doing the thing, and it's never accounted for the kind of prep and what you do afterwards or preparing for it. And so when you quote a price, they're like, whoa, it's almost like greedy. And it's like, no, for you and the Brass Holes to be out there, they're paying for 3 people for 3 I know what they call it, man days, 3 human days worth of work, aren't they? And I'm going to guess, Matt, that you're, as a trio, not possibly being paid your full worth of 3 days worth of work.
No, not at all. Not even close. I mean, it's not terrible scale for the kind of work that it is, but it's not, it's not really sustainable amounts of money over the long term. But it's also, this is not how we make all of our money all the time. So it also is just a bit of a choice to perform together and make some money doing it. I don't know, but this gets back to how the arts, and specifically performing musicians, it's just really hard unless you have a Broadway show or your play in the New York Philharmonic or a major metropolitan orchestra. Making a career performing is really, really difficult.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
Because nobody pays. Nobody pays enough. And if you don't do it, what we have learned is that the people doing the hiring, they don't really care about the quality all that much. So they'll just hire whoever will do it for however much money they care to pay. So things like health benefits, pension, all that stuff, anything that you might think someone who, I had a friend who was a doctor, and he was going to doctor school at the same time I was going to conservatory. And he basically said, it occurs to me that the amount of training that you have and the amount of pressure that you have when you perform is roughly equivalent to that of being a doctor.
He said that?
And, he did say that. And it is true. If you look at the amount of time, because I started taking lessons when I was in 5th grade, and I took lessons, and I still take lessons to get better. I still practice every day to get better.
I think, yes, you are very skilled, but it is interesting to see how people look at people in entertainment generally and are sort of, they look at it and go, "Oh, I could never. That looks amazing. I could never do that." But I would still argue that being a doctor is possibly up there, maybe even a bit more skillful than being a trumpet player. I'm not doing down being a trumpet player, but to be a doctor or like a surgeon, that we're talking like a billion decades worth of training before you start making money. It is just funny to me how a doctor will sit there in awe of what you do. That's all. To me, that sounds like, but doctors are basically wizards.
Well, if you want to know the truth, we went to college together. He did play trumpet, and that's how we became friends, believe it or not.
I'm going to point you to.
So he has a pretty good appreciation for both.
I'm going to point you to the chat room, Matt. You've got to read that. I can't even read that out, but it's got to be read out.
You don't worry about leaving your trumpet in someone, though? Yeah, no, that's true. And for the most part, yeah, it is true.
That wasn't the one. True. That wasn't the one I was pointing to. Mark Greenhow, fine, I'll do it. Brain surgery is pretty difficult, but it's no trumpet science. I like that.
That is true. That is true.
I had a similar position. Sorry, mate, go on.
No, because we're talking about doctors. I used to play in a doctor's orchestra, and terrifyingly enough, doctors played a bassoon, showed up late one time, and they had just come out with these new one-piece folding stands. And I sat there and watched this guy spend 20 minutes basically not being able to unfold this stand properly. He's a doctor.
Yeah. Okay.
And at the end of it, the guy sitting next to me who was off, we were ringers because we were the musicians. He leaned over and goes, "Geez, I hope that guy's not a surgeon."
No, it's really funny. Like, look, I would say, no offense, Matt, I know the skill you've put in. I'm still going to rate doctor/surgeon over trumpet player. I'm going to stand by that. I'll die on that hill. But I had a similar thing. I went for a beer in the woods, my socially distant beer, because you've got to specify it was socially distant. Now, the guy that I was having a beer with, he's still a serving soldier, and he, like, his job, like when I was in the military, I had to do all the soldiery stuff as well, and I did do an infantry tour, and we were used as general kind of dogs' bodies and cannon fodder, all that kind of thing. But essentially, I was a engineer. So my job was generally in the you would call the A2 echelon. So you would be back where the equipment is coming from. It goes out onto the front line, and you would only go to the front line if that equipment was down and it needed to be repaired forward. But yeah, generally, no, I'm back. I'm at the back. I'm not chef level, because the chefs really genuinely are like they hate soldering, the chefs.
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually an acronym, I think,
Okay.
REMF, but I
Right.
can't tell anyone what it means because of the nature of our show.
So it's a little different to the US Army. I know in the US military, like if you're a mechanic, you're an out and out mechanic, and that's you. Whereas in the British Army, there's something called soldier first, and that's the ethos. You're a soldier first. That's where all your training starts, and you are expected to be deployable as part of an infantry unit. And in fact, I was deployed as part of infantry units, and I was in a tooth regiment. So if I was just in a base where it was all engineers, it would be pretty slack. We would go to the engineer standard. If you then got plonked or your unit got plonked into a tooth arm, you would then have to go to infantry standard. So you'd suddenly have to carry infantry standard weights, and you would be expected to do everything in an infantry way. But generally, yeah, my ethos was, I'm an engineer, really. So I don't know why I've gone down this diversion. Oh, yeah, that was it, because of chefs. So we had a chef gets allocated to your troop or your platoon. And I just remember this one chef, Felix, and he really was insisting. He's like, no, I am the chef. I do the cooking. I will clean up the pots and pans. And that is me. But the troop staff sergeant just put his foot down and was like, no, you're coming out on all our squadded runs, you're patrolling with us, and we'll help you with the washing up. And he was a Jamaican lad, and the whinging, and every single march we did, I won't do an impression of him, but every single march and run we did, he spent the whole time explaining in detail why a chef had no business being there. It was brilliant.
Yeah, it must have been highly entertaining for the people for whom it was a regular occurrence to have to do this sort of stuff. They must have enjoyed it thoroughly.
No, we did. And that's the only reason we got him along. Oh, like Felix, his name was. Yeah, that's the only reason we made him do it, was we enjoyed his reaction, and he didn't clock that. But anyway, but this lad I was having a beer with, he's proper frontline and beyond. He's beyond enemy lines, working on his own for long periods of time. His job was basically defeat ISIS. And he played a massive role in all the various successes there. And he's been out on a limb. He's done the dirty on baddies, all that kind of stuff. He turned to me on this park bench and he's like, "Oh man, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it, going on radio and just talking." He's like, "It's brave, man. I couldn't do." I'm like, "You literally mess with the baddies in their bit, and you're saying that about a radio gig, dude? Honestly, it's nowhere near as tough."
You bring up an interesting memory. A long time ago, I worked for conservatory, and I taught adult learners, several of whom were Vietnam veterans, infantry, fought in Vietnam. And one of them actually confessed to me that they had a little upcoming show. He's like, "I don't know how you do it. I am so nervous." And I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute. You were in combat in Vietnam. What do you have left to be nervous about?
Yeah, yeah.
But he was. So it was valid. But it's funny. It's funny how people, when it's their thing, they don't view it the same way as something that they have no knowledge or personal experience of.
Yeah, but rest assured, if there's any SAS veterans or Vietnam vets listening to this, your thing was definitely harder than chatting on the radio about my kids' poop or lawn mowing over their stones that they left in the long grass. Sir Simon there is asking, were you Remy? Yes, sir, I was. Arte Emarte. Yeah, Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. 10 years with the electric donkey on my beret. So, Matt, I think, so good luck with your gig. Sorry, we were still talking about your gig, weren't we? It's you're going to get more out of it than just the cash. Obviously, a little bit of validation too, of oh yeah, I'm still a trumpet player. I'm still amazing. Everybody look at me.
As far as I know, in terms of gigs like this, I'm the only person of anyone I know who's actually doing a real life performance like this. Everyone else is recording stuff at home but basically nobody is working at all right now in my industry.
Just to round off your segment there, the chat room is talking about conservatory. You say, he's right. He's saying, I keep thinking of Matt playing his trumpet in a small, useless glass room built on the back of a house. And that's what we call conservatories. It's like a little glass extension. So that's not what that was. Conservatory is what? Trumpet school?
Conservatory is a term that we use for highly specific, dedicated performing arts schools. So like, you know, it could be a drama conservatory or a dance conservatory. I went to a music conservatory, one of the top 3 in the country as a graduate student.
Ew.
So yeah, no, actually it's one of the things I'm proudest of, was getting into this school, because it was probably the most competitive thing that I ever won. I think they admitted 8 students the year I auditioned.
Oh,
For out of the 500 plus who auditioned, and it was one of the top 3 schools in the nation rated at the time for music instruction. And my audition was held in front of the best musicians in New York. So I'm talking guy who played principal trumpet in the New York Philharmonic for 35 years, guy who played principal trumpet in the Metropolitan Opera, guy who played principal bass trombone in the Metropolitan Opera, leading freelance classical trumpet player who went on to run Juilliard later, was in the room.
okay. Well,
I walked in.
you know that now. You know that now, and you know how big a deal it is now. Did you know at the time?
Yeah, I knew who all those guys were and what they represented. Absolutely. My favorite story was there's a lick in Till Eulenspiegel. Is one of my things. I come in, I start out my solo immediately. Vacchiano, who I'd already met at music camp where I had gone, and he coached me in a master class, goes, "We can't tell anything from that." He goes, "Play an excerpt. Play this excerpt." Starts on a super high note, very easy to get it wrong. I play the whole excerpt down perfectly, and he literally goes, "That's good. Could you start it again for me?"
Ooh, again and again.
And I looked right at him, and I started it again, and believe it or not, I actually nailed it the second time. I played the first 4 notes, and he was like, "Okay, thank you." He just wanted to see if I would screw it up.
Or if you would,
So
if the pressure, if you would go, like if you'd got your head down and was like, "Oh no," so it's a mental thing.
Yeah. And then the next thing I had to play was a super high, difficult piccolo trumpet thing that bass trombone player wanted to hear. And then immediately after that, very soft lyrical thing that the Ray Mace, if you know him, asked me to play. And then I think that was pretty much it. I was done, and I was in. And I still to this day can't believe I pulled it off. It remains one of the most remarkable things I think I've ever done.
And you do have a talent, and it's obvious. The second you started blowing your own trumpet at the Missed Apex event, when you were duetting with my wife, people, it's one of those things where you don't ignore it. It's not a trumpet quietly playing in the corner. And a bad trumpet, I would imagine, is very noticeable as well. But the whole room was like, a thing is happening, and it's mesmerizing.
Yeah, well, in the best of all worlds, that's what you get, that you put something out there that people can genuinely interact and get something out of. So it's easy to overlook because you do it your whole life. But yeah, people who are good at it can have that magnetic effect of, oh, yeah, I should probably listen to this a little bit while I'm talking.
I remember when I first started dating my wife, and because she does the thing she was doing at the time. She was doing a lot of like bars where she was, she's in the smoky bar doing kind of contemporary jazz, her with her keyboard, and it's that same sort of thing that makes the room stand still. And we were dating for a while before I heard her perform. She's like, "Oh, you should come and check it out." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." Like, I'm a musician. Like, how good's it going to be in a pub? And I just remember sitting there with my pint and going, "Oh man, that's different." And I was just absolutely, blown away. So these talents are not to be taken for granted. I'm still saying a surgeon's a little better, Matt. I'm still sticking by that. I'm going to say a surgeon's slightly more.
Well, he wasn't talking about societal impact. He was talking about just the level of training that was required to be modestly successful.
Okay,
in terms of the time you have to put in.
Look, right, we are just approaching the 40-minute time limit here. So I do want to make sure we talk about the elephant in the room, which is my hair, because I have gone. Here you go. We'll do it for the chat room. I'll take my headphones off. Look at that. That's not a ball patch. That's the headphones pressing that down. But I've gone like proper grade 2 all over. Matt is still there with his bouffant, but it was getting wild. Was my hair. I was slicking it back for the live streams because you could only see it from the front, but I just couldn't get away with it anymore. And my wife was she flat out said, I don't think you're handsome with that hair. And she was not hiding her feelings about it. The conundrum was she didn't really want me to shave my head, but she also didn't know how to do a proper haircut. So we sat my boy down as the experiment because his hair is like fully wild. It was long anyway.
Right. So basically full Chewbacca.
Yeah, he was, full Chewbacca. And he's a hairy kid as well. He's 10, but he's taken after their side of the family. Like, he's got like a hairy back already. He's 10. Oh, poor old tree face. Or poor old fur back. So we used him as the experiment, and we just did like a number 4 or a number 3 on the back and sides, just to kind of, get into it. And, we clipped up the top of the hair, got the sides and the back short. And we said, okay, have a look at that. And then we'll shave the top off. We said, look, we'll just shave the top off. It'll grow back. He went and looked, and he saw his hair, and he turned around from the mirror and he just went, no, I'm not doing it. He said, I'm not shaving. I'm having it like this. And he's like really proud of it. If you've ever watched Red Dwarf and you've seen Dwayne Dibley, where he's got his really long poofy hair, but it's shaved at the sides and the back, that's what it looks like. He looks like Dwayne Dibley. It's funny, but he won't let us cut it anymore. He was just like, nope, that's it. This is me now.
Well, he has a point of view at least.
Yeah.
He knows what he likes.
So that was the experiment. So I said, all right, look, let's do something similar with me. I sat down in the chair. I said, look, just do the number 2 blade. Just do the sides and the back, and then we'll have a think about whether we can do a proper haircut. Anyway, I felt the clippers going all the way past the crown. And I went, whoa, what are you doing? She went, what? I said, we'll just do the back and the sides, and then we'll see about the top. And she went, oh. So it was too late. And so she was like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
And you think that was an accident? You think that was an accident?
I think she had looked at the boy and gone, he's going to freak out as well and end up with a stupid haircut. So I'm just going to go for it. So she's just gone for it. She shaved it off, number 2. And this is really sweet, actually, because when we first started dating, obviously I'd just come out of the military, and I had my hair like this the whole of my 20s. So when she shaved it all off, she looked at me and she went, oh, look, it's my boyfriend. And like, she was like, this is you. She was like, oh, this is Richie. This is what you looked like. And so she's happy, and that's all that really matters. So she's pleased with how I look. And actually, she pointed out to me that the only reason I started growing like a haircut at all was because I was trying to make my way in the engineering industry, and I was trying to move up to management positions, and I was scared that I was not being taken seriously. So I started growing hair to look older because I looked painfully young.
You do, annoyingly.
No, but I looked, yeah, okay. So there's one thing being like 40 and being able to pass for 30. That's quite cool. Like, I'm happy now. But I was like early 30s being mistaken for like 16, 17. Less cool.
No, that is a little bit more annoying. I would grant you that.
But it wasn't universally accepted in the house. So I called the boy in. Boy's like, oh, that's so cool. Brought my daughter in. Devastated. She just screamed. She was like, no. And she started crying floods of tears. And she was, what's wrong? She's like, you don't look like my dad anymore. And she was like so upset. And then she started going to my wife and just started giving her the biggest telling off and going, you should have told me. You should have told me you were going to do this so I could have said no. She did not like it. Not a fan.
I am completely here for little V giving your wife a bollocking.
I couldn't believe it. And I've had to delete it. I've got a video, but I'm going to have to delete it because it wasn't fair. I sneaked back into the kitchen. I took a little video. It's still in my recyclement. Took a little video of her just yelling at Nicola. And Nicola is creasing up, crying, trying not to laugh and seeing this 8-year-old because she was just so upset. And like, I was like, wow, she had so much of like my identity to her is how I look.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. You know, I once upon a time had much longer hair than this.
Ooh.
And my wife, when we first met, it was definitely a feature and not a bug. But as I got older, apparently to her, it became more of a bug and not a feature. Whatever, it's how it was. So it's easy to manage. You tie it back, you get it cut every 6 months. That's all you ever have to do. But she'd apparently wanted me to cut it short for some time. However, in a fit of hilariousness when we were first together, I once told her that if I ever cut my hair short, I was going to go full on baldy. I was going to shave all my hair off. And she told me afterwards that she literally waited forever to even suggest it because she was afraid that if she did, I would really shave my hair.
Oh, no. So what did you do?
But then by that point, my daughter was like old enough to have an opinion, and she didn't want me to cut my hair. And so I was like, well, I'm out of this. You're going to have to work it out with the kid. You know, I said, I could care less what length my hair really is. It's not that important to me at this stage of the game. But it was another 6 months of negotiating before all the details got worked out and I got the haircut.
It's so funny how it's like it is out of our hands. Like I was perfectly happy to be sitting there with like my little headband on and just watching it get longer and longer at the back. But I could just see the increasing disgust on my wife's face, so I had to take some kind of action. But yeah, daughter was distraught. She was even crying by the time her dance lesson, her Zoom dance lesson, and the teacher said, "What's the matter? What's the matter, V?" And she was like, "My dad's had his hair cut and he looks really bored and stupid." And she was like, and she said to the teacher, "And no one even asked me." And the teacher was like, "Oh, I'm sure he doesn't look that bad." She's like, "He does." So I get called over and I have to go to this Zoom dance thing to put my head in and go, "Hello, everyone. This is me and my bald head." But yeah, later on I tried to cheer her up. Like, so I do this this dance to Dua Lipa, Physical. It's like my dad go to make them laugh, you know.
Right.
Yeah, you have like a thing like in Liar Liar, Jim Carrey has the claw that he does. My go-to thing is my Dua Lipa intense dance moves where I stare them in the face and I won't do it on the live stream. You will fall about laughing. I don't want to distract you whilst making heavy machinery. So I went to do my go-to Dua Lipa dance moves to cheer her up and say, "It's still Dad." And she went, "No, you can't do it. You don't look funny anymore." So I was like, "Oh, no."
Oh.
Yeah.
Ow.
It's bad, isn't it?
So is this still ongoing? Have we begun the acceptance, or are we still in the anger and not acceptance
I
stage?
got her to approach slowly, and I said, "Look, tell you what is fun, and this is what's always fun with a freshly clippered head, is it feels really cool to the touch."
Yeah.
So I said, come on, feel it. And she was touching it, and she started smiling, and I went, see, it's quite cool. And she went, "Only if you don't look at it." So no, we haven't fully reached acceptance yet. And Taylor, you're gonna have to get yourself to a Missed Apex event if you want me to pull that out. If you know, I'm not gonna do the dance on the live stream. Well, no, go on.
So
Man.
it's a funny thing, you know. Kids have this weird resistance to change.
Yes, we've talked about it. Yeah.
And I don't know if we have time for this story or not, so I'm just going to tell it anyway.
Nah.
My wife has always, as long as we've been together, once a year, changed some major aspect of our living relation. It's like a nest. She's like, we moved this piece of furniture over here, which requires usually days of calculations on my part to figure out where everything's going to go. That may be a lie, but she doesn't listen. So I'm just going to pretend that it's me that has to do all the complicated figuring out. And when we moved into this apartment, we had a choice. We had two rooms. One could be dining room, the other could be living room. And we made the living room next to our bedroom and the dining room next to the kitchen. But the dining room is a bigger room. It is a cooler room in the sense that it is temperature-wise, it is a cooler space to be in. And so recently my wife has been making noises like maybe we should flip-flop the rooms because we've been in the same apartment for 3 years now and we've made no major changes. And my daughter, oh my goodness, nope, absolutely, nope, not going to have it. No,
You cannot-
this is not acceptable. I refuse to permit this to happen in my house is basically her stance
How
right
dare
now.
you change the known world?
Yeah, exactly. But it's hilarious to me. I'm actually kind of glad because, man, it would be an awful lot of work.
Yeah, but she'll be moved out soon. Uni's just around the corner, Matt.
I know she'll be a junior next year. She'll be a junior, 16. We're 2 years away from college. I mean, like we're going to virtual college visits and virtual college tours and
Scary, Matt. But we've got the excitement of F1 coming up as well. So make sure you follow us to find out exactly what's going on in the Missed Apex world at MattPT55, me at Spanners Ready. Follow our F1 show at Missed Apex F1 and this show at Indoors Remain. Still haven't changed it, Matt. Still haven't changed it. We're stuck with it now. We're going to see you here in the shed for Remain Indoors, though, next Tuesday, I think with Liam Taylor. Until then, work hard, be kind, and have fun. And where possible, remain indoors. That's the best bit. The indoors is the best bit.
Yeah, see, I don't see why you don't just go remain indoors at indoors remain.
Remain indoors at indoors remain. Yes, that's a great idea I just had. I might do that.
Brilliant. You should run with that.
I should. Good idea, Bob. Yeah. Okay. Click. Stop there. Yeah. No, it's overrun. That's all right. It went off on a. There's no real plan. I've got one task left today.
I don't think we can even